Welcome to the Adam Kramer Show, where we ask, analyze, and argue about the hottest pro-life topics. Today, I'm here with my good friend, Peter. Peter, how are you doing today?
Great. How about you?
I'm doing very, very good. Thank you so much for asking. So today, we are going to be doing a kind of continuation on last week's topic, which was with Amanda, how abortion harms women. And so today, with Peter, I'll be talking about how abortion harms men. And we'll also be sprinkling in how abortion affects society as a whole as well. So without further ado, Peter, let's hear a little bit about why you're pro-life.
So I'm pro-life because I believe the child in the womb respects the dignity has the dignity of the human person, and every human needs to be protected.
Right. Yes. And so like we learn this in Theology of the Body, how every human being from conception to natural death is deserving of the respect that, a normal human being, no matter how small they are, how old they are respected as a person. And so we believe that it's not right to, kill them in the womb for convenience sake. So let's dig into the topic today. So let's talk about how abortion is affecting the men in our society. How it's
Okay.
So do you have any questions that you'd like to ask to prompt the conversation? Any points you'd like to hit?
Well, usually people like to ask what, but I'm going to ask, how does abortion affect men?
Right.
So, I did a little bit of research. Went to the Knights of Columbus website, and they did a little bit of research. There's not much research on this topic because everyone's talking about how it affects the woman. The media portrays it as a woman issue when actually it requires both the man and the woman, of course.
Right.
So 1 out of 4 abortions happens in a married couples relationship.
Mm-hmm.
All the 3/4 of that are not married. So there's something wrong about this, but I kind of want to focus on the married men who had abortions with their wives.
So obviously we know that the purpose of marriage is between a man and a woman. It's for procreation and unity between the husband and the wife. And so when we see the procreative aspect being taken out of it, this is why contraception is wrong, and this is why we find abortion to be intrinsically evil. It does not line up with the purpose of a husband and wife's love, So we see here that with contraception and abortion, this is being taken out of the equation, and it's damaging to, think about the joy that a couple has when they, have a child that they actually want to keep. Think about that joy, and think about the joy that, normally would be shared by anybody who in society is expecting a child. I mean, this is a factor that's been, so far removed from the culture we live in today, how a child is seen as a burden and not like a life to rejoice in. So I think that's interesting to talk about how, it's damaging to the relationship and to all parties involved, the man, the woman, and the child.
I would say children are burdens, but they're a burden in which comes goodness. This hard burden is usually gotten rid of by this society because they nowadays people are always like, oh, let's do something let's do something that I feel like doing. And that's why we're dealing with emotionalism. This is where it leads up to the responsibility of the man and how they have a responsibility in this good burden, which is yes.
And that's why, you know, we understand that there are differences between men and women, and that's why a child needs two parents to be raised in a good environment. You know, like we can't have absent men in society, because then when, you know, an abortion is, I mean, that's a leading cause for abortion. Like, I don't have a stable living situation, right? It's the job of the man. Let's look at the identity of a man, like what's needed to provide.
So actually, that's great, because I have a quote from the Knights of Columbus and their research. So it says, while the research on men and women and abortion is limited, a consistent observation is that men will repress their own emotions because they believe that is the most appropriate way to care for their partners. This is totally false.
Right.
Ironically, many women report that had they received assurance of support from their partners, they would have chosen to carry their pregnancies to term. So if men usually nowadays have this passive, just like, oh, I don't want to deal with this right now, I'm going to leave it up to you. This is a false sense of love for the wife and the child. This is selfish.
And they're constantly being told by like pro-choice people that, you know, no uterus, no opinion, right? They're not allowed to have an opinion because, you know, they're not a woman. They can't make this choice, right? But if we see how, you know, the conception of the child is a choice made between both the man and the woman, in any good situation that conception occurs.
Yes.
But, you know, then we can't say that, you know, if there's a couple who outside of marriage conceives of the child, you know, both consenting to having the child, to having sexual relations in the first point. And, you know, you cannot say that the choice to engage in sexual activity is a choice between both of them, but then, you know, the choice for the child is only between the woman and no one else. Like this, it's just, it doesn't line up with, you know, everything else that happens before, you know, like, and if we look at how, you know, fatherhood is so dwindling in our world today, many fathers, you know, they're absent. They leave their wife and child, you know, if they're in a tough situation, that's like, you know, that's very high in many communities that, you know, the man just leaves, hits the road.
And that also leads to other problems, such as most inner cities are very common with this issues. The father leaving the mother stuck with the children. She has this huge burden in the way that she has to fill in the father's place, which it's almost impossible to do unless you're a saint. But these mothers are left with their children. These mothers are left with their children. Their children have a 50% more chance to partake in drug abuse, alcoholism, 90% chance to drop out of high school. So there is a lack of fatherhood in our inner cities, even in the most well-formed Christian communities. There is a lack of fatherhood.
Yeah, and it's just disturbing to see, because, you know, that's another thing with crime too. Like, a lot of criminals don't have a stable, you know, father figure in their life. And so if you look at the jobs of a man, and how our culture is saying, you know, it's toxic, right? They talk about toxic masculinity all the time. I think this is it's kind of gotten overlapped because there's so many more stupid things that they decide to go after nowadays. But, you know, it's not consistent with the job of a man, right? To say that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, women can be independent. Women can, provide for the family. They can, but that needs to be done in partnership with the father. Like this is a joint issue. This is not just the woman's problem. And that's, I mean, you can even see that how that's flawed, how that's, anti-feminist,
Mm-hmm.
saying that like the woman, to take away the motherhood of a woman is essentially to take away womanhood.
Yes. And actually, back uh, more on abortion itself concerning fathers, I saw this video when I had Instagram back in the day. Um, Somebody posted it, and I thought it was just gonna be like, oh, a cliche, um, you know, fetuses are human. Yeah, but I already know all this. But I pressed it anyway. And it showed this video of this man outside of abortion clinic screaming and knocking on the door. He was locked out. He had no decision in the matter. He was like, "Don't kill our child. Don't kill our child." And
Yeah.
after seeing this, I was like, it's sickening how much society, how far society's taken this to exclude the father and just basically just lied to the mothers that this is their only decision.
Right.
It's absolutely sickening. And
Right. And I think Amanda actually brought up that video last time about the man, screaming outside the abortion clinic. It's chilling to see that this is seen as okay.
yeah. And what's even worse, I looked in the comment section and people were like, well, he should respect her decision. And I was just so astonished because this is his child too. It's not only hers. And actually, I have some statistics about how abortions in marriages affect men, not the abortions out of marriages, because usually the man just cops out and leaves
Right.
the woman to forge on her own. But so 75% of men need counseling because there's something wrong. Substance abuse is fluent after abortions for men. Some get PTSD. Some become lifelong alcoholics. This is and going back to the women's side of after the effects of abortion, they have usually the same problems, but in their own kind of way. Nightmares, depression, their bodies basically not as good as it were. It's destroyed.
Yeah.
The men deal with nightmares too, and it's just like there's something wrong with it. If both the parents I mean, it should be obvious there's something wrong with abortion if both the parents suffer so much. And sometimes they just ignore it and they're like, oh, it's completely natural.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And I don't know how, moving into the analyzing section, I don't know how we can, get men to step up and get men to be advocates for life. I think that that's something that we need to see more of. And so I don't know, going into the analyze section, could we, kind of see how we could get abortion to be a men's issue too, to be, seen as wrong by not only the media, but also by, all the men who are standing by idly, like pulling the Adam in Eden, Adam just stood there while Eve ate the fruit. And I think that if we just saw more of men standing up for what they know is right and what, the truth is, that way we could get to a point where we respect the man's decision as well. So how do you think we can get to a point where that is the thing?
So some people analyzed this actually very thoroughly. They said, they said even though they were totally atheist and just random scientists, they said mostly the people who refrain from sex before marriage and then get married are more likely to have a good life.
Right.
So I think one thing men, I mean, this is a huge, is the responsibility or the abstinence from sex before marriage, and also the responsibility it takes to be married.
Right.
So one way to decrease this option of abortion, I don't even, it shouldn't be an option, but one decrease to get it out of people's heads is that when you I'm just stuck. It's just
Yeah.
when
I think
when you're
yeah, go ahead.
when you're in a relationship, it should be a self-giving love that consists of both the opinions and the beliefs of parents, both the parents, right?
Right. And so I think what you're trying to get at is trying to bring back the meaning, the definition of what it is to be a man, what it is to be a father. And that's something that has been lost in our culture. Like, I mean, if you look at even, I think the Disney Channel is a big proprietor of this, showing dads as, these doofuses, these, clumsy, and there are of course exceptions to this, but it's not portraying fatherhood and manliness in a desirable way. And I don't know many Catholics who don't want to be a father, either a spiritual father or a physical father. I don't know anybody who is anti-man or who does not want the responsibility of having to provide for a family or the responsibility to care for the woman and the child. And so we're seeing what in effect is the destruction of the communion of persons, just like Juan Pablo and I and Maya talked about. We're seeing that, but also the destruction of manliness and manhood. And I think to get back to a point where a man is respected in this decision, where a man can make a choice, we have to see men step up to the plate. This is not, we have to acknowledge that this is a man's issue too. And that this is a big factor in abortion.
And that also means if you're gonna be in a relationship, commit to it, because actually the 3/4 of women who get abortions are left abandoned by their partners. Okay. They probably shouldn't have done it in the first place without the bondage of marriage, but they're just abandoned. The men leave, and the women have this really hard time discerning in what's thrown in front of them is abortion. You should get abortion. It's horrible what men do nowadays, leaving a woman on her alone to make this decision, and they just cop out. They're just like, oh, I'm gonna live my life now. Let me go do it with another woman.
Exactly.
It's horrible.
And it's seen as a standard. It's seen as the norm, right? This is what's seen as manhood, right? This is what's demonstrated. You said 3/4. That's a big number. That's a lot of people. Because if you look at the number of women that have abortions, that's a very, very frightening number. And so to see that those are the people representing men, because they're majority, right? So everybody's, that's what people see when they look to a man.
And it's not corrected either by society. Usually in public schools especially, it's anything but corrected. It's promoted in is saying, oh, just you can do it just as long as it's safe sex and use this and that, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It takes a lot of work to get back to where we were. And I think that the answer is, not to try to get back to where we were, because that's just going to lead to more failure. Because if we go back to a point, then we're just going to see history repeat itself. So I think we need to find a new way. And this is the biggest task that we have, to find a new way to get to a point where abortion is wrong. And I think that's something that it is, needed for not only for the future generations, because if we have abortion, imagine the future generations. They're going to be, this is
there'll be like not even a future generation.
Exactly. That's the thing. And so, just a final point before we get into the argument section. There's a great book by Emily Stimson called These Beautiful Bones. And it's, I know we're reading this book in class, but it is such a good book that, it's pointing out all the necessary tasks of a father, right? And so I loved that section on spiritual fatherhood, to guard the bride, to defend the defenseless, also to lead others to Christ, to there are a couple more. I'm going off the cuff here, so
yes,
it's kind of difficult.
Actually, one thing I pulled from that as I was reading is, if you don't protect the child, you don't protect the mother. It goes vice versa. So it's either that's praying in front of the abortion clinic is one example she used. It's not only an activity or a duty for women to protect the children, but for the man. Of course, this should be obvious, but yeah,
it's not, right? And I think that what we're looking at is, if you look back to Exodus, we're reading this in Mass, like the Mass readings are lining up with this now, Exodus. And so if you look at how the Israelite people were enslaved by Pharaoh, and then you fast forward a little bit to, all the stuff that happens in between then. I want to go then to the 1800s, where slavery was a big thing. You see, African Americans being treated as 3/5 of a person in our culture. And then you fast forward to 1940s, where the Holocaust is going on and the Jewish people are being persecuted. And then you fast forward to now, and we see abortion going on. This has been going on since before the time of Jesus. Like, this idea that people are less than a full human being has been going on forever, And so what we need to see is an exodus from abortion. The exodus from Egypt, we need to see the exodus from abortion. And that's what we need to be praying for.
But what makes this more horrific, though, is the fact that these are the most innocent people in our society. They didn't even, not only did they even get a chance to live, they didn't sin or anything. They're the most innocent people in our society.
Exactly.
And they're the ones being killed.
Right. And they're not even being baptized. Like, there are situations that I've heard of.
Actually, there's my sister, when her miscarriage, when they immediately gave her a baptism. It was I wish all kids had that chance, but no, it's
when they're torn apart limb from limb, like it's horribly difficult. And so I think that that's what we need to see, an exodus from abortion, and that's what we need to be praying for. So moving into the argument section, what I want to do is, do you want to argue from the standpoint of pro-choice or pro-life?
Pro-life, because
right.
I can't think like a pro-choice.
Gotcha.
I'm not saying you can, but yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll be throwing arguments at you, and let's see how
Mhm.
you can deflect them. So I'm going to mainly focus on a man's responsibility in this. So
Mhm.
let's get right into it. So why do you think that a man should have an opinion on whether or not a child or a fetus should be aborted? Right. This is the woman's body. It's her choice.
Just as the man and woman created the child, they should. It's being their child. It's the responsibility of both the man and the woman. So the child's responsibility, even though born by the woman, should be the man's, because it's not only yes,
Not only her child.
yes.
So then why can't, how come we see all this going on with men having this opinion, and like why are men being so affected by this? Like, they should respect the woman's choice.
It's a hard one. Um, if help me here, Adam.
So like, I think that something to start with there is to say, well, fatherhood is such a distinct thing that is only for a man, right? Only a man
Mhm.
can be a father, and only a woman can be a mother. So if we can see how it's dehumanizing to the father to strip away his fatherhood, um, then we can begin to see how the woman is stripped of her womanhood and her motherhood through abortion.
Great job. I wish I could have thought of that.
um,
Yeah.
I'll try to throw an easier one your way.
Okay.
So why do you think, um, why is it your opinion that um, fathers need to step up to the plate? Why do you think that, they don't have the right to just run away from the woman in crisis?
Because I would say leaving the woman in crisis is very sexist, true sexism. That it's denying your responsibility in society and giving it to others. It's it's inhumane. Um, leaving somebody alone like that. I mean, imagine how you would feel being left alone. Um, Probably a little hard to get a job or support your child. It's just wrong. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, that's a very good job. You got that one.
I mean, I haven't really, before we started recording, I haven't really thought about this section, even though I just finished listening to the previous or 2 weeks ago's discussion, but
Yeah.
I didn't think about this part.
Well, any final points you want to make before we sign off for this episode?
Um, Actually, I have one quote from Bishop Fulton Sheen. Lots of you may have heard of him. Many of you probably haven't.
Venerable Fulton Sheen.
Yeah, I forgot. Venerable. Hopefully soon to be blessed, but
Hopefully.
uh,
He's
he
great.
says this is truly a lightening of what it means to be a father and a mother. So he says, when a man loves a woman, he has to become worthy of her. The higher her virtue, the more noble her character, the more devoted she is to truth, justice, goodness, the more a man has to aspire to be worthy of her. The history of civilization could actually be written in terms of the level of its women. So I think one of the issues nowadays is that women are not being supported enough by the man to reach this level. Neither are men by the women. It's a
Right.
lack of communication. It's a lack of love. It's a lack of goodness. It's one of the main issue, or actually, in fact, the main issue in our society. It's the deterioration of the human, or the human family.
Right. And that's the most natural thing, right? We see that not only in human life, but, in animal life. Like we see, animals, it takes a male and a female to have a baby, to have a little child, to have a little cub, or whatever species it is, And so to see the destruction of this, it's horrifying to see that it's being torn down from the roots.
The culture of death, as JP2 would put it.
Exactly. Yes. I just want to thank you very much, Peter, for coming on and talking about this, because this is a subject nobody's talking about. Like, nobody's talking about how men are affected.
That's why it's very hard to discuss, because there's not much research done on it. I'm just a teenage kid. I just pulled from wherever I found
exactly
would come up with good reasons. But yes.
Well, I hope we can have you on some other time. This is a very good discussion.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Why is the party that's telling us to believe the science and follow the science? Why are they not following the science? What's going on here?
That's a very, very good question. I really think that a lot of people just simply do not know these facts. And this aspect of the pro-life argument, this when does life begin, is something that, obviously it's very much rooted in science. And so I think when you can just share this information with people, I think for one, that's a huge starting point. And it's, it's hard to remember every stat and stuff. And I truly don't think you need to have all this memorized to be able to go out and engage in these conversations. Something I kind of do is I just have the number 20 in my head, because heartbeat 20 days and the pain, 20 weeks, roughly. So I think those are good markers. And then I think just always whenever someone picks any sort of point during the pregnancy to say, okay, well, it's okay to have an abortion up until this point, I would just kind of put it back on them and say, why? Because the reasoning is usually something that is still relevant after the baby's born, that dependence, it's well, baby's just as dependent. So yeah, I think kind of those couple of things are what at least has helped me having these conversations with people.
Right.